I'm DMS, you're watching the Headphone Show. We're here at SoCal 2022 with Dan Clark Audio. I just had a chance to sit down and listen to your new headphone, the EXPANSE. And wow, that is totally different from anything I've heard before, aside from the Stealth, which I remember listening to and thinking, wow, if this was an open back, that'd be really, really cool. So if you could kind of, I guess, give me a little bit of background on this, because visually it totally stands out. Sonically, it stands out from pretty much everything else around here. Where did this thing come from?
So the concept for the EXPANSE began as we were planning for the Stealth, but the Stealth was such a hard project and took so many years to get the way we wanted it to be that we really thought it was best to only release one headphone at a time to make sure we did it right. And after we released the Stealth, we began working on voicing the open version of it, which became the EXPANSE. The EXPANSE shares a driver in common, but it took a ton of work to re-voice it and accommodate the different physics of an open back headphone versus a closed back headphone and actually make that work. In fact, it took a full year of just voicing the headphone. The result was obviously just a wonderfully open sounding and spacious headphone, but unlike some headphones which throw a big soundstage, one of the key objectives here was we really wanted it to deliver a lifelike presentation. And part of what that means to me is that instead of rendering imaging as points in space for instruments that are in the soundstage, it's to actually render objects with volume in space. So like you feel the physical size of an instrument. A kick drum is not a small polite thing going boom boom, and as a point in space, it feels like an object that has volume.
And I also noticed that this is using, like the Stealth, your acoustic metamaterial, which that's a really unique approach to things. I imagine that's kind of what made this sound possible.
The acoustic metamaterial is incredibly interesting and complicated technology. Basically, it's a one-way acoustic waveguide that allows the sound to pass through it in one direction, and then when the energy reflects off your head or the ear pad, whichever it is, it's then absorbed by a matrix of resonators that allow us to sop up all the energy that would otherwise become standing waves. And because of that, it delivers a really natural tone for the higher frequencies, like especially, for instance, listening to cymbals, it doesn't sound like tss, it sounds like a tang, and you get the clear sense of the metallic nature of the instrument. Or with strings, it never gets strident or hot sounding. It's always just has a degree of sweetness and clarity to it and tremendous resolution, but you never get that edgy bite that sometimes you can experience when you've got peaks in the wrong place.
Yeah, and another thing that actually stood out specifically, I think, to myself and a lot of people was, this is an open back planar, but it actually manages to have a bass shelf.
Yes.
That is something that a lot of people say is like either impossible or incredibly hard to do.
It took a year.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And we could only do it because we have complete control of the rest of the spectrum. And even then it took some serious work and a couple of novel ideas for us to get the bass shelf to actually follow the right curve. And the key thing with it is that we actually also modified the response from Stealth a little bit. Stealth follows the Harman response curve a little more closely. EXPANSE, we deliberately put in more energy in the kind of 100 to 250 hertz range, which we felt gave a more natural delivery to the bass, as well as to vocals.
A little more body.
A little more body, and that's part of the soundstage. But the key part there is you have to do that just right, or you end up making the mid-range sound fat. And then male vocals start to sound like this, and
boomy and all that.
Everybody sounds like they're trying to be the voice of God.
Yeah, or the radio host. Another question I don't have one in my hands, we can see them around the room. This design on the back, this grill that protects the backs of the driver, is super unique. It almost looks like that, like those AI-generated structures you see online. How did you come up with this?
So we've always been interested in this technology called generative design. It attempts to emulate the concept that is used in physical, biological structures because they are often so optimized for mechanical or structural integrity. And they also make very interesting visual forms. And so while we didn't use explicitly a generative design application for this, what we did was we kind of looked at the structure of some biological things, such as seed patterns on flowers or cross sections of stems, and we created a couple of mathematical functions that we overlaid to create this almost organic looking structure.
Yeah, that really stands out. The first time I saw it, I was like, whoa, what is going on?
Yeah, it's pretty neat. It manages to be interesting without being busy. I really love it. It took a lot of work to get that right.
Coming to the show, I was very enthusiastic about. That's the first thing I had to sit down here. Another question, and you can choose to gloss over this one if you want, but you've kind of taken the Aeon sort of design and grown it into what we've seen with the Stealth and the Expanse and all that, but you still have headphones like the Ether 2. Do you have any plans to kind of move this sort of tuning and technology into that line one day?
We don't talk about future plans yet.
That's fair.
We won't just gloss over it. We'll give a hard pass.
I have to ask, Dan, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. And thanks for letting me listen to your headphones too. This has been an awesome experience.
Thank you. Glad you enjoyed them. Cheers.